Hear ye, hear ye. This meeting of the Smart Cities and Service Improvements Committee is now called to order. We need roll call.
Councilmember Davis.
Here.
Vice Mayor Jones.
Here.
Chair Landiap.
Present.
Welcome.
All right. I guess next order of business, review of work plan. Councilmember Jimenez is always also here. May the record reflect.
Councilmember Jimenez.
Present. Okay. We're going to change the agenda. Is there an add drop motion?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. The agenda is amended. All right. No consent calendar. On to the first item.
Great. Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, committee members, members of the public, city staff. Dolan Beckel here, Director of the Office of Civic Innovation. I'm joined here in the front box by Assistant Director of the Finance Department, Lisa Titano, Deputy Director of the Finance Department, Purchasing and Risk Management, Jennifer Chang, and Deputy City Manager, Kip Harkness. We have two reports today that, in addition to our Smart City Roadmap project, which we do every month, that I'm framing as foundational Smart City projects, these two being procurement and digital inclusion. The last time we presented to this committee on procurement, we lost quorum, so I made an absolute pinky swear promise to the procurement team that they would be first on the list for today's important report. So walking through today's agenda, we will go through a verbal update on the procurement improvement and readiness program update, and then we'll do the Smart City Roadmap standard update, and this time our infotainment is going to be an online demo of the Office of Emergency Management Startup and Residence Disaster Response Platform using a startup here in Silicon Valley called Gruntify, and then last we'll provide an update on the Digital Inclusion Partnership. So I want to anchor our discussion on procurement on the Smart City Roadmap. So keep in mind that the Smart City Roadmap you see in front of you are just the high priority Smart City projects as ranked by the departments and Civic Innovation and ultimately approved by this committee. There are many other Smart City projects being delivered, and there are many, many other traditional projects and existing services being delivered by staff here today. When we identify which projects on the roadmap currently require a strategic competitive procurement, it becomes pretty obvious the challenge facing the city, the procurement team, and the departments to plan and deliver technology-centric smart cities and Internet of Things projects. And if we select just one of these projects, the red circle, the Advanced Cybersecurity Products and Services RFP, that RFP evolved into 7 different procurements. The bottom line is that the volume and complexity of procurements is expected to increase dramatically over the next 10 years. This in turn requires additional subject matter experts and points of contacts within the department to develop quality scope definitions for these procurements, and this quality scope definition is the single most important entrance criteria to the procurement process. So given the backlogs of procurements we saw last year and this increase in volume and complexity, Finance and Civic Innovation partnered to identify improvements where we can make the end-to-end procurement process better and get the city ready for this wave of technology and innovation projects, hence the Procurement, Improvement, and Readiness Program. So with that framing, I'll now turn the presentation over to Finance Director, Assistant Director Lisa Titano.
First, you're going to cover the agenda.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was going to cover the agenda. So today's agenda for this presentation is going to be, first of all, we'll talk about why San Jose needs a procurement improvement and readiness program in more detail. We'll discuss what the program is. We're going to give you a little bit of procurement 101 background, and much like the Seals and Croft, I am only a bill sitting in Capitol Hill. We're going to do the RFP life cycle, a day in the life cycle of the RFP. We're going to talk about the prioritization process we put in place and then talk about the current status of the program. So now I will turn it over to Assistant Director Lisa Titano.
Thank you, Dolan. I'm Lisa Titano, Assistant Director for Finance. And where's the next slide? Thank you. So why does San Jose need the PIRP? As Dolan talked about, we have a great increase in volume and complexity, Additionally, we also have had the last 2 years of a very challenging situation with our procurement team, experiencing high turnover and vacancy. And staff does recognize that there's always room for improvement, and we're committed to that. In addition to these needs, however, there are several objectives that the program must meet. We must ensure that finance procurement staff is working on strategic and complex procurements in the right order and remains aligned with citywide priorities. We want to ensure that projects are not ready for the procurement phase, are inadvertently prioritized and use up a valuable but limited resource, which is our procurement staff. We also want the prioritization process to remain transparent and flexible so that departments can adjust their work plans accordingly and advise the Procurement Prioritization Board as circumstances change. And I'll describe that board to you in a following slide. And lastly, finance obtains the necessary consulting services to evaluate the current procurement model and formulate recommendations to improve the city's approach to procurement without unnecessarily increasing risk. The short-term focus for the program will be throughput and prioritization, with prioritization emphasizing a citywide perspective. We will engage a procurement consultant to assist with throughput by augmenting staff and working through a strategic procurement with the staff. That way, the consultant can be familiarized with the mechanics of the city's current procurement process. Next, we will focus on establishing the Procurement Prioritization Board. So it's a good thing I gave it an acronym of PPB. The PPB is made up of the assistant city manager, the finance director, and the budget director. Purchasing staff will support the board, and board members have committed to meet at least monthly and more frequently if needed. To facilitate the decision-making process for the board, departments have been asked to answer questions about their projects and will assist the board in determining which projects are top priorities for the city. As circumstances change, which they always do, the board will meet and reprioritize, hence their willingness to meet more frequently as needed. Lastly, we have added 2 new analysts to the strategic procurement team and increased our attention on retention and strategies to reduce turnover. Our longer-term focus will include more strategic work with the consultant. They will focus on ways in which we can improve efficiency and effectiveness of the procurement process, which will definitely include training and staff development. In addition to the roadmap that Dolan covered, we were in front of this committee back in December 2018 to emphasize the dramatic increase in the number of procurements needed to support the city's innovation goals. Finance sees the pursuit of these innovative solutions as a necessary direction for San Jose to go and views it as a good problem to have. As we work through these procurements with our partners in IT and innovation, we are in agreement that complexity is also a good problem to have. The added complexities allow us to put viable solutions in place that will not only address the city's complex challenges, but will also endure time. Bear in mind, implementing solutions that are dependent on technology requires the city to actively manage the risk of obsolescence. This will require the city to conduct frequent upgrades and implementations to keep up with the constant improvements in technology. And this is where we see that the increase in demand is gonna grow exponentially as well. To understand the direction that San Jose needs to go, we first need to examine our current procurement model. Jennifer is now going to cover the steps of our current model, highlighting the importance of each step.
Thank you, Lisa. So just to give you some background on city procurements, right now there's 3 different main buckets in which procurements are conducted here at the city. So finance purchasing, we're responsible for the procurements and contracting of non-consultant services, IT, supplies, materials, and equipment. So it's things like your fire trucks, your body-worn cameras, all of the highlighted projects that Dolan had in the first few slides, those would be procurements that our team would be responsible for, and is the focus of today's discussion, the focus of the PBB's focus. So departments are responsible for the procurement of consultant services. They're evaluative advisory services, so they're like your consultants for doing permit fee assessments for PBCE, things of that nature. And Public Works is responsible for the procurement of public works projects. So, next slide, please. Thank you. So within the finance purchasing operations, we're further divided into 3 main sections. And we've got our strategic procurements group, which is the focus of the PBB and today's discussion. You have the procurement card program, and then you also have the tactical procurement group, which is responsible for low bids that result into purchase orders. So focusing on the strategic procurement work group, I've got 6 members here that are available to work on complex procurements like requests for proposals. They're responsible for the entire end-to-end process. So we work with the departments on their initial procurement needs, on helping them to develop the scope, to notice the RFP, to awarding the RFP, to drafting and negotiating with the vendors on the agreements, and taking those items to council before we bow out of the process. We also provide contract management services, so when our customer departments want to do a change order or an amendment or want to exercise an option, we also manage those negotiations and do the drafting and execution of those contracts and bring those items to council as well. So it's a full service team, a heavy load, and as Lisa had mentioned earlier, we did add 2 new positions to this group, so we have 6 total in the strategic procurements group. So one of the things that with the PBB we want to underscore with our departmental customers is that the procurement and contracting process is a team effort between them and finance purchasing. So it's not them, creating a scope and throwing it over the fence and expecting results. We really need active engagement from our customer departments to really help us define what it is that they want. Finance purchasing is responsible for ensuring that the process is conducted in a fair and equitable manner, and that solutions are selected that meets the organizational priorities. But departments are the ones responsible for engaging in the process to appropriately identifying those needs. So before the PBB, this is kind of the way a typical RFP request would have been initiated. You identify the need for an RFP, and it's done usually through one of 3 ways. The first is purchasing is either contacted by the department about the need for a procurement, or for a new procurement, or the need to rebid out an existing service, or purchasing already knows about it, and we know about an expiring agreement, and we proactively reach out to the department to ask about their intentions on service continuity. A second way is purchasing identifies consolidation opportunities across departments for procurement. So we see several departments having the same service, and we think that it'd be a good use of time and resources to consolidate those and just do one procurement for all. Or it's because of an audit or a council directive. In terms of scope development, departments are responsible for writing that scope. So there has been challenges in obtaining those initial scopes where procurement might be notified of an upcoming procurement, and they want to know the steps to initiate, and we have a discussion of all the items that need to be checked off in order for us to initiate. 1 is budget, for example. 2 is having something written down as to what it is that you actually want, and then getting appropriate approvals from IT or OEA if those come into play, and thinking about those evaluation factors that they want to consider. So there's a checklist of items that need to be done before purchasing can even effectively engage with the department in putting out those procurements. Once those departments send a draft scope to purchasing, sometimes the challenge has been is that they deem their role complete. They send it out and they start the clock on purchasing. When can the RFP go out? Not realizing that the reality is that even though we have a draft scope, it still requires a lot of work between the department and purchasing to complete and finalize into a full RFP. Draft scopes are great as a starting point, but we often see is that the scopes sometimes are vague or there's contradictory information. We really try to work with the departments so that when we put an RFP out there, the vendor community can clearly understand what the ask is and not have to amend those RFPs too much. So in order to sort of address these issues, purchasing earlier this year issued a strategic procurement and contract request checklist in January 2019. It basically documents all the items that purchasing needs in order to help the departments get ready for their procurements. And that's been rolled out for about 9 months now. In terms of the work prioritization process, the previous prioritization approach was a combination of, it was purchasing making the call, essentially. So it's a combination of first in, first out. Who had their scopes in first to us, we try to get those out first. We had to weigh whether or not we initiated a procurement because it was an existing critical service that just couldn't wait versus a new service that we could wait a little bit longer because we didn't have it before. Or individual departments or divisions providing us the prioritization. We have some regular scheduled meetings and calls with certain groups and managing their procurement requests. The prioritization process, because it was centralized really with finance purchasing with really no objective criteria, we really needed to do something about that. And that's why we have the need for the procurement prioritization board, and some of the objectives that Lisa outlined is something that my team is very excited about. So the prioritization under the Procurement Improvement and Readiness Program, we're requiring that the departments utilize the RFP checklist to determine their readiness. And then we are asking also the departments to complete the procurement prioritization sheet in which they are prioritizing all their department procurements in one before sending it to us. And then the Procurement Prioritization Board reviews submissions and determines the prioritization on our behalf. And when our staff has the bandwidth, then we would know exactly which procurement we need to work on next.
Okay, thanks, Jennifer. So to summarize the accomplishments that we've made so far and our next steps, our key activities have been, we've created an RFP checklist to educate departments and improve the quality of the planning process. We've also issued an RFP for a procurement consultant and are currently evaluating finalists. We kicked off the Procurement Prioritization Board, and we actually held our first meeting on October 3rd. We've briefed senior and executive staff on the program and the PPB. We've conducted an introductory meeting for all departments, sponsors, and procurement liaisons where we covered the checklist, the PPB, the new processes, and the program in general. What our next steps are is to select a consultant and start working with them, to onboard the consultant so they can evaluate how to increase throughput while also improving the procurement prioritization process. And lastly, to evaluate and plan for potential structural changes to the city's Muni Code, procurement policies, the city organization, process improvements, and other areas where improvements can be made. So with that, staff's available to take your questions.
Vice Mayor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. I'm trying to get a better understanding in terms of the IT's role in all this, and particularly Rob's role. Rob, can you come forward and just want to ask you a couple of questions? Since I saw you sitting there, figured get some exercise. At least my vision would be that IT would have a role in this process. Do you sign off on all the IT procurements that go through finance, or do you have any direct involvement, or does it? Tell me how it works.
Sure. So there's two main touch points. Is in the budget process, we have some input on all the requests for IT. And then when it comes back around for purchasing, the purchasing division and IT coordinate very tightly on all approvals for every IT type purchase. It flows through our ticketing system, and it goes through security review, applications, infrastructure. So everyone who needs to check on that purchase and the project management piece as well can have input and work with departments to try to make sure that whatever is purchased can get implemented effectively. So it is a very tight coupling.
That's great to hear, because I was concerned, one, about security, which is obviously a major focus, and the other one was just compatibility and integration. So it sounds like those issues are being addressed when we do our procurements.
Yes, in the last roughly year and a half, we've matured that process.
Right. That was it.
All right,
Thanks.
thank you.
All right.
Councilmember Davis.
Thank you. Just trying to get my arms around this. I missed who's on the PPB. You have the assistant city manager, the finance director, and it sounded like there were only 3 in it, so I missed the last one.
That's right, and the last one is the budget director.
The budget director. Okay. And so the input into prioritization is the prioritization worksheet for the departments themselves? Is that how that?
Correct. So we've established, we were going to show you it, it's really complex though, but we established a worksheet where, dependent on certain criteria, they were to give them a ranking, and let's pretend it's 1 through 5. For certain criteria, for example, might be the complexity. Is it a new procurement? What's the priority that the department has placed in respect to their other IT projects? And there's a whole laundry list. What we've committed to is the list of criteria, because this is so new, that we are willing to maybe refine them or change them or take some out altogether, depending on the results that we see as we conduct more PPB meetings.
Okay.
Yeah, and Councilmember, just to elaborate on that a little bit, so we came up in collaboration with some pilot departments with a list of 6 criteria that the departments have 100% input on creating, and that's the RFP type. Is it an existing service or completely new, an existing contract or completely new RFP? Is the RFP ready? Is the scope quality input? What's the degree of complexity? How does it align with council annual priorities? How does it align with city manager priorities? And how does it align with the top 25% of the department's overall procurement prioritization? So there's multiple elements of priority in that, and what's the opportunity cost, and what is the duration risk of the proposal. So we piloted it with airport and a few other departments. It's gone all the way up through the assistant city manager and the budget office, and spent a lot of time getting agreement on that's the right way to prioritize procurements, not which department's director yells the loudest.
That's very helpful. Good. And you know, Dolan, that I like hearing opportunity costs. I saw your smile when you said it. That's great. One question about the complexity. So if it's extremely complex, do you rate it a lower priority or a higher priority? Why? I don't understand how that fits into the prioritization.
The complexity it doesn't have as high a weight as some of the other criteria, but we did put that in there because the very complex, for example, cybersecurity had 7 sub-RFPs, And it'll take more time. So like scheduling jobs in a manufacturing firm, we still have to take that into account. It doesn't necessarily bring down the weight, but it is a harder one to schedule. And I think that's why we included it in the criteria.
Okay, I understand. That's helpful because cybersecurity being a very important component, as the vice mayor was discussing. I was curious how you would rank that, it being very complex, but also very important, very high opportunity cost if we don't have good
Correct.
security, right? And so I assume that would cancel it out in terms of, or it would be a higher priority because of those other factors,
Right.
regardless of the complexity.
And as we were developing this score sheet, I would call it, every time we kind of change the criteria and the weighting, I would say, how does cybersecurity come out? Because whatever method we use, that has to come to the top. And then we know that we've developed it effectively.
Great, so you had a canary in the coal mine, that's fantastic.
We
Thank
sure
you.
did.
And one other element of how complexity plays in, channeling my inner Julia Cooper here, is that the more complex it is, the more support we need from the departments. And so if it's a complex RFP, but the departments don't have the level of subject matter expertise to finalize the scope and work with us, then that actually impacts the scoring in a negative way, because it's not a good use of the time if we actually don't have a department companion to work the complex RFPs.
That makes sense, thank you.
Mayor Ricardo.
Thanks. First, I want to say thank you to everyone for the progress you made so far. And this was a really big challenge for us. And I know it's been a huge obstacle for us on a lot of fronts. And so I just really appreciate Lisa, Jennifer, Dolan, Kip, everyone who's worked hard on this. I know Erica and Rob. I know this has taken a lot of hands. And so thank you for getting us to this point. And I think it's really promising. Can you help me understand a little better, though, the deliverable we get from the consultant? And forgive me if you covered this already and I came in late and missed it. If you just want to say, hey, I covered it already, I'll go back to the beginning.
No, you didn't. No, we did not cover it. So I understand it took a while. Obviously, once the budget was approved in January, or in July, what we were doing before that was working on what are the things we can do internally within the city, just the departments, finance, and civic innovation working together. So that's how we came up with the first deliverable, which is a checklist, so every department knows exactly what the entrance criteria is. The second was the prioritization process and putting together a non-department biased but department influenced, content influenced board to prioritize these, so we're ranking the right way. In parallel, we're actually issuing the RFP, getting bidders back. So now we're in a point where we're at this long-term focus, which is the consultant's going to come in and basically we've divided it up into they're going to do three primary things. One is they're going to actually live the life of Jennifer's team by paralleling Jennifer's team in some of the procurements to see how do we actually work the procurements. And so they'll be paralleling them and helping augment, but at the same time learning both the strengths and weaknesses of the process. Then the second thing they're going to do is then make recommendations, whether that be Muni Code changes, organizational changes, technology changes. And then the third is they're going to develop training so that as we make these changes, the departments fully understand the impact of those changes. Because what we saw is since 2004, when we largely centralized as a result of some of the telecom procurement issues that went to a grand jury, we rotated and perhaps over-rotated to centralization. And in doing so, we lost a lot of institutional knowledge in the departments. And so what we were seeing at the beginning of the year was departments that's why we created the checklist. So now we'll be coming back with an independent third party, but experienced perspective on how we might better balance centralization and decentralization. That's going to be some of the core of what the consultant's recommendations will be. And then obviously whatever we change, we need to train all the departments in that change. So the three majors are augmentation, strategic improvements, and then training.
Okay, that all sounds great. Are we confident we're going to have somebody as a real expertise in technology procurements?
Excuse me, what was it? Could you repeat the question?
Are we
there?
confident that this consultant's going to have a real expertise in technology procurement specifically?
Yes, part of the evaluation criteria, which is public knowledge to the bidders, would be their experience in doing strategic IT procurements, both case studies and their approach that they propose to us.
Okay, great. It seems like every week we read something new about cybersecurity attacks. I'm hearing something like 2/3 of, the major cybersecurity attacks now are on cities and public agencies, and thinking, gosh, we better be thinking about this at every step of the way in the procurement. I'm probably channeling my inner Rob now. Anyway, so I'm just hopeful these are the kinds of things that, we're going to be integrating in the process. Anyway, thank you very much.
So I just had a quick question about our pilot projects and how this works with that. So currently, we'll have a pilot project. We'll go through this system. They'll test, gee whiz bang, we like it. But then we can't say, okay, let's just order this and let's make it our default thing. We'll test it through. We have to go out to bid again. So how will this process help streamline that so we can work with partners, or is that even possible given our rules?
No, I think that's a valid question. So that was part of the challenge we had with our demonstration policy agreement, was that where if it's a new nascent technology, they could, and it was zero cost to the city, vendors could use the city as a living lab. But at the end of it, there still was this, but then we have to go out to a procurement. So leveraging some best practices from the state of California and San Francisco, we piloted the Startup in Residence program, where there's a more condensed, very specific RFP that the company City Innovate brings the supply to us and helps us manage the RFP. And then we do a minimal viable product, a pilot, and if that's successful, then there's a path to scale. So we did the Startup in Residence, and we're expanding that this year. And I think that's one model that we'd want the consultant to look at to figure out are some elements of that make sense to incorporate into our mainline procurement to deliver speed, and that's certainly something we're going to be talking about once they're onboarded.
All right, thanks. Can I get a motion to accept the report? Or?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Oh, sorry, I apologize. It's been a while. Public comment, Mr. Beekman.
Thank you. To speak about the overall procurement process, I feel Santa Clara County and the VTA are trying to do a lot to working towards the ideas of procurement. I feel procurement should very much include the ideas of innovation there is with openness and accountability. Openness and accountability within city government can create an ease and efficiency and an organization and a decency that can be palpable and tangible to the everyday public. It can then ask the everyday public to consider how to add their own ideas of openness and accountability to a community process that is meant for everyone. And that can very much contribute to the corporate models San Jose seems intent to build. It is this mix of corporate and community voices San Jose is trying to work towards, and that people like myself are continually trying to look for ways how technology can find a system of guidelines that can work towards the voice of everyday democracy with the voices of everyday people and local government alike. I feel this has to be talked about in the future of your procurement process, and that to speak about and mention when introducing not only corporations, but in recruiting young computer engineers, what to expect in working with San Jose. I think these are the keys to innovation and its excitement. It is the ideas of peace, sustainability, and better community democracy practices that the city of San Jose is continuously avoiding, hiding, and keeping way too cool. Please learn to offer the simple and the good publicly and openly. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, once again, can I get a repeat on that motion? All right, all in favor? All right, and it is accepted. Moving on.
Great, thank you. We'll do a quick shift change. moving on to our next agenda item, D2, and I've lost the projection here, but we'll be pulling that shortly. So this is where we're returning back to our normal monthly cadence of the Smart City Roadmap. So we're going to be moving on to that. In our infotainment segment, as part of the Smart City Roadmap, will be a project overview and demonstration of the Gruntify application, which allows us to coordinate within departments and outside with nonprofits to effectively help those who've been displaced in a fire event. So here to present our next report on the Smart City Roadmap is Smart City Manager Reggie Nair, who will introduce this topic's additional presenters. So Reggie, when you're ready, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, Dolan. And good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Honorable Mayor, members of the committee, and members of the public. My name is Reggie Nair, Smart City Manager for Civic Innovation. Oops, sorry, my thumbs are all stuck. Okay. As you all recall, we presented the Smart City Roadmap back in March 2019 to the committee and to the public to essentially create our baseline of high priority projects. So for the month of October, we have been inching forward in the right direction. So right now we have one project. It's the City Open Data Environment project that has changed status from red to yellow. And that has been circled on this slide for your reference. So for just to show our performance, these bar charts over the past 4 months is trending towards a positive direction. And again, it validates the benefit of the monthly reporting and then also helping staff focus on delivering the projects that are in need of critical, to go on corrective course of action, sorry. So for the month of October, we are continued to stay in steady state with green status, so that's good. And as you can see with the projects that are red, the status has, we've been taking corrective course of action, and so that's been now under 10%. So the staff is very dedicated in delivering that. And then as just for members of the committee and the public, we do want to keep track of this month's change in status. So City Open Data Environment changed from red to yellow on the right hand of the slide. So just for the committee and also the public, we want to simplify the format of reporting the red status projects so that everyone is aware of the team's corrective course of action to be taken. And also, we are noting the duration of how long these projects are red, just to be transparent, and then also to have accountability to ensure that these projects get back on track. So for My San Jose, the team is diligent and working collaboratively with the finance department in issuing the next rev, the 2.0 of the RFP. And then also they are pursuing some change orders to the original contract so that they can add some language translation, and that they'll be going to council later this fall. Data strategy, we are working internally in gathering the staff and also seeking forward with the data analytics lead and hiring a new one. And so currently we're finalizing the statement of work with Johns Hopkins GovX for the data analytics community engagement capacity, where it's part of the Bloomberg What Works City certification. The next project is the IT infrastructure modernization. Finance is working towards finalizing the fourth of it's a total of 4 contracts with vendors, and so they're working on finalizing that last contract so that so IT can move forward with that. And then Access East Side, the teams have been very, there's several departments engaged in this project in going to council and also getting the agreement signed so that we can move forward to Overfelt. So we'll be going October 22nd to seek council approval. So another new feature I wanted to add to our roadmap status update was also to just take an opportunity to spotlight the projects that have been on track and they're green. And so this month I wanted to highlight 2 projects. The first project is the Text to 911, which is a sub-project to the Next Gen 911. So as everyone is aware, there has been a growing evolution as to how we're communicating from landlines to cellular and now to text. And so the county, Santa Clara County, in collaboration with 13 other agencies, including the city of San Jose, launched last week the Text to 911 option. It's in English only. And this is mainly to help those that are hearing or speech impaired, or if someone feels unsafe. So there was a team of city staff in the police department who coordinated with Cal OES. They collaborated with several agencies in implementing best practices for our call center. And then also we're part of issuing the policies, and then collaborating also with several wireless telecommunication companies such as AT&T, Comtech, to help with the integration of the city's tech control center and test the system. So currently this is a web-based solution, but the police department will be moving towards an integrated version with the 911 phone system as they update it. So I do want to acknowledge the teams that were leading this effort, and some of them have been able to be here in the audience today. So I want to just congratulate, Supervising Public Safety Dispatcher Laura Beersdorf, Public Safety Communication Specialist Lisa Martinez, and also Public Safety Communication Specialist Ken Gerasi. He could not be here today, but just a kudos to him. And also Joey McDonald, who's the division manager of the call center. She's been a tremendous leader in helping these teams and being successful. So there are several more, but these were the three that really led the charge, so thank you. So the next project I wanted to spotlight was the Joint School Issued Library Cards Project. This is from the Library Department. And just some background of this particular project. Only 18% of low-income students at fourth grade in California score a reading list that is at or above proficiency in accordance to the 2017 National Assessment of Education Progress. So in an effort to address this issue, the library had two major goals with this project. One was to increase access to the library materials and services for K through 12, electronic access. And then second was to strengthen their relationship with San Jose Public Library and the school districts. Initially, the team, they focused primarily on three school districts, which was Moreland School District, Mount Pleasant, and Union School District. And their goal was to obtain about 10,000 school library cards by the end of this year. So that obviously just grew exponentially because more school districts really wanted to be a part of that. And so they were able to increase by 4 times, so over 40,000 with the addition of San Jose Unified School District, Discovery Charter School, and then also Lutheran Burbank. So, and more to come. These 6 have signed an agreement. So a huge kudos goes to Nancy Donnell, who is not in the audience today, but she was a tremendous effort in starting the project. But Michelle Amores, she's currently working on it and adding more to that list. So just a huge shout out to those two. So the latest update on the Small Wonders, we are making progress in finalizing the scope of work for both the operational and the community benefit challenges. We are working closely with Startup and Residents in order to issue the RFP. We also had an opportunity to present all the challenges to our Smart Cities Advisory Board, and so they were full support of advertising and helping us in marketing that effort, so that was very helpful. Also, we are in the process of hiring our Small Wonders manager, so hopefully soon. That will be finalized. And just for future updates, as we notify the status for the Small Wonders projects, we're going to utilize the same traffic lights status update colors that for the small wonders, and I've consolidated everything into one slide for simplicity. But so right now we have the 2 projects that are currently in green, one you're going to hear shortly, and the 2 columns that are white, they are in initiating phase, and so once we get the small wonders manager on board and the RFP ready, in collaboration with startup and residents, you will start seeing status updates on that. Okay. So with that, I do want to focus on our feature with Small Wonders. So just to give some background, in an emergency, quickly supporting displaced residents is our top priority for the city. And in today's presentation, you're going to hear several departments who partnered with a startup that we found through the Startup and Residence program to create an app that will quickly coordinate response and support services. So I'd like to introduce the 3 presenters. We have Aurelia Bailey, who's from Office of Emergency Management, and then behind me is Fred Tran, who's with the Housing Department, and Ken Nuss, who's the Vice President of Gruntify. So take it away. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor, Mr. Chair, committee members, and members of the public. As Rajani said, my name is Aurelia, and I'm a Senior Executive Analyst for Office of Emergency Management. And with me presenting today is the other lead of the project, Fred Tran, Interim Program Manager from the Housing Department. But before we move on, talking about the tool that Ken from Gruntify covered, as you can see, we're going to cover on the agenda for this presentation, talk about the team, the story, the challenges that we encountered along the way, and some solutions, process, and lessons learned. The team, as I've already mentioned, both myself and Fred, some city members that's also sitting with me in the back today, Assistant Fire Chief Reginald Williams, Mark Garcia from Planning, Building, and Code Enforcement, Molly McLeod from also with Planning, Building, and Code Enforcement Department, and my 2 bosses, Jay McCamus, City Manager Office for Office of Emergency Management, and Ray Reardon, the Director of Office of Emergency Management. With the Gruntify team as Ken Nuss, who's behind me, who's also going to be presenting, and then Jeff Portwain, who's the CFO of Gruntify. So our story began with the McLaughlin fire took place in April of 2018. It was a large complex that required evacuation and care for over 120 residents from the Summer Winds apartment. I'm going to actually pass it over to Kip to give us further background for this incident.
Kip Harkness, Deputy City Manager. I get to do the challenges slide here. So I just want to set a little bit of the context before we dive in. First of all, we had a highly effective fire response. Every time I have an opportunity to work deeply with our fire department, I walk away impressed with their level of professionalism and capability in responding quickly and effectively to a situation like this. If I recall correctly, we actually had folks out on the balcony that they were rescued, and the swiftness with which this fire moved was only matched by the swiftness with which our response. So the good news is we were able to get everybody out of there with no major injuries and certainly no deaths in this case. We also activated the Emergency Operations Center for an operational period, not to support the response, which as I said was very swift and effective, but to begin to support the recovery. And in that we realized we had what I would call a Goldilocks problem, right? The fire department and our partners in the American Red Cross and housing are very used to, unfortunately, and very capable of dealing with the small fires where 1 or 2 or 3 people are displaced, or it's a household or 2, and their existing process is effective. When it comes to very, very large events, as we know, we've put a lot of investment into getting effective in an event where we'd have to mass care and shelter people in the case of a large disaster, and our capabilities in that regard are increased. But there's a little bit in this middle area here where it's not 1 or 2 households, nor is it a full-scale disaster, where we were missing some capabilities on the recovery side. And just to paint a little bit of a picture of it, the apartment complex is subject to both Council Policy 1720 and also the rent ordinance. And this provides some obligation on the part of the landlord to actually care for the residents. And so, but we hadn't used that policy in practice very much and hadn't implemented it. So at one point in my role as the director of the Emergency Operations Center, we were actually in City Hall at this point, but I convened everybody who needed to be in the room to figure this out. And we had, if I remember correctly, 27 people in that room for several hours trying to figure out of who was the chain of who needed to inspect what and who needed to make what call and who needed to tag what, under what ordinance could we help, and who is responsible for this, all the while that we have people who are displaced and in need of urgent care. Again, kudos to both Housing and Red Cross, all the while we were providing urgent care and support to them, but having to figure out our own processes in an extremely complicated way. I recall one of my favorite playwrights, wrote a play once, and the title of the play was Pounding Nails into the Floor with My Forehead. And that process to me was somewhat akin to that. And in the end, we got the floor done, but I'm pretty clear there are more effective ways to do flooring than what we did on that day. And so we tasked ourselves in our after action report with several key improvements to the process and the approach. And the story that's being told now, and the good work of others, begins to address key elements of that after action report with, in this case, a startup in residence as part of the solution. So I'll turn it back over to the team who did the real work to talk through the solution that they came up with and how they approached it. You can finish up.
Fred Tran, the interim program manager for the rent stabilization program. During this incident, we definitely had discovered a few housing challenges during the process as we were trying to assist the displaced tenants from the apartment complex. The first item found was the primary motive of communication amongst internal city staff as well as departments was one chain email. So if you can imagine, there's essentially an email with 30 to 40 stakeholders involved in 4 to 5 different departments trying to identify where the process was with a status, adding additional comments, waiting for any type of response, as well as asking additional questions. This process was made it a bit more difficult to get a live update to see which action was required to be taken next. Essentially, there was just no central location to gather data or information. The next item that we discovered was essentially what Kip had mentioned. Code section 17.20, which is housing's code, discusses the obligations as well as tenants' rights when there is any type of incidents. This particular apartment is also subject to the apartment rent ordinance, which is code section 17.23. Both are actually, they oversee this particular unit. Depending on what the property owner decides to do to remedy the situation and to move forward with getting the property online would dictate which action or obligation would be required. Similar to what Kip had mentioned, from tagging a building to triggering any type of other legal aspect, if they chose one avenue, it could ultimately delay the process, and that was one of the issues that we kept running into, was trying to get that process to continually to move forward. And then during the final aspect is when the building department came out to do the inspections, we are still on paper format for the inspection approvals. And it was noted that it would be much more efficient if we could get it to an electronic format and have everything uploaded to move the process or expedite it. So what we had ultimately came up with was a cloud-based solution that could be accessible by every stakeholder, that was basically available 24/7 from any platform, as in any device or any computer. A key function to this application would be to essentially have an automated push notification, basically conditional logic built in to notify each department, whether it is housing, code enforcement, building. After fire completes their incident report, then those push notifications would work their way through the process. And finally, this application would actually also have a dashboard. So with the dashboard, all the incidences that occurred within the city would be viewable from one platform and prioritized in any way possible. Essentially, thankfully, Regina had come to one of our managers' meeting for the housing department, and this is when she had actually gave us the STIR idea. And what had happened is we were knee-deep in this process of assisting the tenants, and Aurelia applied with the challenge statement, and we were blessed enough to receive 16 applications for our RFP, and essentially selecting Gruntify was the most viable option because they've actually worked with other big cities, similar type of incidences, and for us it's been just work in process, and we hope to get it online soon.
So some lessons learned. Multiple departments such as fire, building code, and Office of Emergency Management is one team. With the app that Gruntify has built for us, multiple departments are able to collaborate in real time. Housing Element and the city has dated relocation policies, so owner's obligation and tenant rights. So we continue to work with our city attorneys to update protocols and standard operating procedures. So what are some next steps? This has been such a great project because from the many departments that we've collaborated with, from the fire chief to the different directors, they've all been so supportive, and everyone is pretty much ready for this tool. So we're really just about adopting and installing this app. We start to train our internal partners, train staff that has been identified, such as our battalion chiefs to inspectors and duty officers. Our hope is that we expand this app to external partners, such as Red Cross. I do want to give a shout out to Terry from Red Cross, who's actually out here today, because he's been great, and he and his team is actually ready for this tool also. The other component that we'll probably work on next is be able to coordinate volunteers and donations. So with that, I'm going to actually hand it over to Ken, who is going to talk a little bit about the tool that he has built for us.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor, Mr. Chair, committee members, and members of the public. My name is Ken Nuss, and I am the VP of Sales for Gruntify here in North America. I'm going to be showing everyone a brief sample of our app today, and it's going to show you the disaster response system as we have it and how it's going to be used in the field by the fire department. I'm going to start by setting the scene that the fire department is actually dispatched to a structure fire at an apartment complex in a residential area. Obviously, the fire department is going to arrive on scene. They're going to put out the fire, or at the very least, get it under control, at which time the battalion chief is going to open up the app on his or her smart device. Let's see. So once the app opens up, once the app, technology, okay. Once the app opens up, it's going to geolocate the incident location on a 3D map. The battalion chief will then open up the form and be able to fill out the information. Section 1 is just about the location information itself. Section 2 is going to touch on the structure. And again, you can see how fast it's able to be done. And Section 3 is going to be about the demographics, more so the number of children, the number of adults, the number of handicapped people. It even gives the opportunity for the fire department to determine if there are multiple languages being spoken at the scene. This will allow to get translators to the scene much more effectively and quicker. Once that's all done, the battalion chief will open up the camera within the app, and be able to take as many pictures as he or she feels is necessary to give a good picture to the responding agencies. If you notice, there's the ability to annotate on top of any of the photographs. Sometimes you might know what you're looking at, and the obviously person receiving it may not. So you can make those connotations there. Once that's done, simply hitting submit brings the incident to the incident command center, where it'll populate on a map as a blue dot. And the automation agent at that time will send out the push alerts, as you see here. In this instance, it's going to the OEM professional. They'll get this email. They'll click on the View Incident Report, and they literally can take the time to go through each and every question that was filled out on scene. Again, you got to imagine this. This is all done in real time. So here the OEM professional is looking at the pictures. They can literally scroll through each tab. By doing so, they're seeing, again, all the information in real time. Number of floors, number of let's see. Yeah, here the percentage of damage. At some point, this person is going to need to provide an update. And as Fred was talking to, the update is going to be really for everyone else, all the other chairs to see. They'll just click on the button, and they'll be able to type in whatever message they want the housing department and other department heads to see. So they'll end up typing that in. And this is critical if you think about it, because now in real time, everybody responding, whether it's the outside organizations or the internal city departments, they'll be able to better know what type of resources they need initially before getting to the scene. So with the housing department taking charge and being really responsible for the displaced residents, they have a different dashboard. And if you look here, each tab up at the top is or represents a organization or internal department. And at any time, housing or any other department lead can check in the status. And that's what this person's doing. They're just tagging into each field and seeing who updated what. So really, that's it. This design, this was designed for small incident fires, but it can scale to major disasters pretty much overnight. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to Kip.
Actually, so that this ends our report. I think just a summary. Again, this is what we classify as a small wonder using startup and residents. So all this was done in less than a year through a competitive procurement process that, and the demonstration was done at zero cost and high risk. But if it proved successful, as it did here in this case, then we're able to move forward with Gruntify into contract based on availability of funds, and not have to do what we've done with demonstration projects, is put all the effort in, get a great idea. Now we have to go out to bid and share the idea with everyone's competitive competition out in the marketplace. So that ends our roadmap update and the small wonder demonstration of the Gruntify application.
Vice Mayor Jones? What? Oh, no, okay. Yeah. Mayor?
Thank you so much for that. It's a great, really, I don't know whether I'm more impressed by the actual product or the fact that we did this in under a year with existing procurement. I think obviously you're doing a lot to change.
Both.
Yes, they're both very impressive. So thank you, everyone, for your involvement in this effort. And by the way, I love the name Gruntify. I don't know how you came up with it, but yeah, it's cute. And by the way, Kip, you know, I know that you underplayed your role in that particular incident. I remember it very well. We had dozens of folks. I can't remember now, but it was dozens of families I know that were homeless, and I really appreciate everything that you and the fire department did in housing to get everybody back on their feet. That was really great work in that case. A question about who has access. In an ideal world, I agree it would be great to get access to Red Cross. I know there's some of this information we have to be very, very limited in who we give this to, because we know there are ways of scaring people with information that is partial and not complete, and there's information that we know emergency responders need that shouldn't be out in the public right away until we actually have done what we need to do to secure premises and get people in safe places and so forth. But I would love to see this ultimately expanded so that all stakeholders, means also all victims' families as well, can get online and understand, hey, what's the latest update? So you guys aren't getting overwhelmed with phone calls, as we know. I mean, just thinking about the flood, for example, and just how much of our personnel time was spent responding to questions that in a perfect world would all be easily posted online to a webpage that everyone would be able to see. And that distracted from our ability to be able to get families back on their feet. And I'm wondering, are there ways in which we can cherry pick information that we know we'd need to hold back that's only for emergency responders, but push everything else out so that would be open to the public?
Ken, I believe I remember from some of the demo work you provided us that there's the ability to, as people come in, to have them give them access to some more restricted fields and such and such. Can you give a sense of how that might approach as we scale out, first to partners like the Red Cross, and then to ultimately the potential for actually involving the public in this kind of work?
Sure. Within the platform itself, every user has the ability to have their restrictions set. So whoever is managing it, if it's the housing department, with regards to all of the stakeholders, each person literally can have a different tier or level of information that's granted to them, and you guys have access to handle that internally. It doesn't need to be done with us.
Great. So we just
Role-based
just a matter of
permissions all the way.
just adjust the settings.
Yep.
Okay, that's really exciting. Also, just want to give big kudos to the team that got the text to 911 up and running. It's not very often that we can say something we're doing is saving lives, and that's really wonderful. Wonderful to see it up and running. We've gotten great response so far from the community and my own social media. Just people are very grateful to see it. So thank you. I just wanted a quick question about the library cards. Was that 40,000 kids we've now gotten to?
So we have over 40,000, but we didn't quite get the full data on Luther, Burbank, and the Discovery Charter School. So it is over 40,000 now. But
Great.
the initial goal was just 10,000.
And so the specific innovation here is really a delivery system that is we're using in the schools? Or is there something more that I missed? Like that.
There sure
Here
is.
comes Jill.
Hi,
She's going to tell me.
Good afternoon, everyone. Jill Bourne, City Librarian. So the innovation here is super library nerdy, which makes me very excited. The whole library catalog system actually has over 500,000 confidential patron records in it that governs your usage of the public library. And to be able to come up with a way to integrate with the school system so that we could automatically create records for students that would have a unique identifier that's also confidential, that complies with the school district's very strict regulations around privacy for students, as well as the cities and the libraries' requirements, but to be able to do it in a way that's automatic instead of having to try to issue 100,000 new cards every year to every student. Is actually a pretty significant technical innovation. And because we are blessed with 19 school districts, not just one, that means we have to do it 19 times.
Yes,
and
blessed.
So that was always like a prohibitive sort of factor, that, the idea of like,
Yeah.
well, we could do it, but then we'd have to do it again 19 times. And so just the momentum that's been created around this, and the fact that we now have 9 different school districts in the works and others that are really interested is very exciting.
So what we're really saving is every year tens of thousands of kids sitting in line at their local library with an overworked librarian trying to get them a card and get their information.
Or just never getting one.
Or never getting one. And in this case now, we're just pushing it out, and it's all happening through the schools. Yeah, that's great.
And we calculate that the current progress we're in will be about 50,000. And once we add all the schools, it'll be closer to 100. We're actually working with Eastside Union High School District, which is super exciting.
Great.
So those numbers will go up.
Wonderful.
Annually, yeah.
Well, thank you for that. That's great.
Thanks.
And then last question. I know there's lots of good news in all this, but my San Jose, I know, is challenged. Can you help me understand better, sort of, I know they were stuck in the procurement line for quite a while. So now we think we've got a path where, what is it, 8 months from now, we think we'll have a procurement done. Will that mean we'll actually have an updated product, or will we, where will we be?
So the specific answer to your question is that we are working the procurement internally right now before we release it to potential bidders. Then we'll go through the actual bidding process to elapsed time frame, which Jennifer Chang put it at about 6 months. So I think it's, if you're, 6 months from now, we'll have someone selected, then we'll start contracting, then we'll start scoping the release. So unfortunately, as you phrased it, you're probably still looking at over a year before you see a what we're calling 2.0, which we may ultimately rebrand or rechange that name, but with the actual the end result of the next procurement with a replatformed and application would be at least a year away, over a year away.
So given all the time we've had to think in the meantime, could we just skip 2.0 and go to 3.0 and call it even?
Well, I think we would say is based on what we've learned, to be perfectly honest, and based on the amount of investment we've made in 1.x, especially with language translation, we are going to make sure we take a pause and we look at our strategy, both a sourcing strategy of sourcing and procurement strategy, and make sure we're making the right decision based on where we are now.
Okay. And in the meantime, are there, I know we've been making some incremental improvements that are not quite 2.0. In the meantime, are there more that we can expect?
Yes, in fact, we just released some updates to graffiti, so we can actually provide a response back to the reporters, and that was just released. There have been some, for those who may have met with Dave Sykes and saw a picture of the My San Jose dashboard, it was incorrectly reporting by council district. That's been corrected, which is a very important thing. And there's been some other technical data synchronization errors to make sure the accuracy of the data coming out of My San Jose has been improved. So we're confident in the accuracy we're much more confident in the accuracy of the data now, and we just released the graffiti functionality enhancements. And then what the team is working on now, which creates a bandwidth challenge for procurement, is the MBA to look at language translation in 1.x and get that out in a prompt manner. So that actually is the focus of the digital services team and the procurement team right now, is the language translation, scoping that, getting that contracted, and implementing it.
To 2 additional languages, or 1, or?
Right now, they're looking at Spanish and Vietnamese.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And okay, great. Great to know there's improvements continuing to happen. Now, can we say that that functionality that you have in responding to graffiti is not applicable now to all of the categories of complaints or concerns? That is the ability to respond?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mayor, one question you started to allude to, which I think was important for us to highlight, because there's good news and the bad news, as you said, is on the data strategy. Last time we met, and of course Councilmember Davis left just when I'm talking about data, but last time we talked about the challenges of the city is having in bringing in talent, and we talked about growing data skills within the city. That's kind of what that first sentence says, is we're working on that and identifying people within the city that we can grow into data leads and eventually be a chief data officer. Obviously, that's not something that happens overnight. As I did report last time, we were having challenges with keeping up with the private sector compensation. We just couldn't we couldn't attract the talent. Very excited to announce that we have a verbal acceptance of an offer from a data analytics manager that's worked with a private sector company, but all of his clients have been the public sector. He wanted to make, because of family and having a small child at home that's keeping him up late at night, he wanted to pivot to the public sector. We were able to make him an offer that he's happy with. It's almost a 50% cut in his pay. but this person for the first time meets all of our criteria of expertise, chemistry, teaming ability, and we're really excited to finalize the offer and get him on board.
Wow, that's wonderful news. Thank you, Dylan.
The second point there to translate, because I know it's come up, is I have a statement of work on my desk with the Johns Hopkins University to move forward with the Knight grant on community engagement data analytics projects. That's part of us becoming a certified Bloomberg What Works City, which gives Bloomberg more confidence investing in us.
Yeah.
Because we're showing our ability to build capacity, and they've invested over $2 million in Climate Smart, but we need to prove that we are worthy of continuing to invest, and this What Works City certification is that measure of confidence in us. And the statement of work is on my desk to move forward, and the first step that we've worked through with support of the Parks Department and Jackie from Housing is we're going to be engaging in some intense online meaningful community engagement training. So this is Johns Hopkins bringing best practices on how we can do meaningful community engagement around data. And we're going to have up to 20 people in online training, both from Housing and Parks and Recreations. We're looking at the parks concern as an area that's ripe for data analytics and engaging the community and how they want to report parks concerns and have them interact with that on that. So after a long time of mobilizing, we're finally down the road of making those steps towards becoming a Bloomberg What Works certified city around data and community engagement around data. And I have to thank Jackie in the Housing Department and Avi Yodam in Parks for agreeing to help move the city in that direction.
Thank you, Dylan. Thanks for the great news. And just to understand the specific case study here, you said it is in parks, but it involves housing. Does it mean encampments or?
So I'm sorry. There is a current capability the city has for the community to report concerns they have about our parks.
I got it. Yeah.
And so that's a great way to start working with the community. What do they want to see information reported back to them in a data analytics type community engagement project? Completely separate is some of the what's been called the parcel mapping, which is a terrible name, but the displacement and affordable housing and market rate parcel mapping to help developers. That was also a candidate project that we think will be able to help move forward. And all this would be taking place right after the holidays.
Really exciting. That's great news. Congratulations on the hire.
I'm very pleased to see a lot of the green and not so much yellow and red on the roadmap. So excellent work on that. I can't help but feel a little bad for Snapchat for having their features be caramelized, again, with drawing on the pictures. But at least they still have cat ears and whatnot. On the Gruntify, I was wondering, can we use that with some tweaks to kind of make that a citywide CRM in essence? Because I've heard rumblings that, since I've first started as a council member, that the city is going to have a citywide client relations manager, and so I held off on purchasing one. I'm up for re-election now, and we still don't have one. So my thinking is, if there's a fire, there's some sort of earthquake or disaster in the city, and we're using Gruntify to kind of work across departments to do that, from a traditional client relations management software thing, you're trying to keep track of how many times like Mr. Smith or Mrs. Jones calls, but that doesn't really matter so much to me as a council member. It really matters more, what are the hot spots in my district? Where is illegal dumping happening? Where are the sidewalks that keep buckling, et cetera, et cetera? And I kind of see an application less for emergencies, more so just more mundane, creating a heat map across departments if, different levels of access. DOT wants to fix the pothole. I want to know the pothole's fixed, but I also want to know that, I have one vigilant resident who keeps on driving around and reporting these things. So that kind of thing. Rob?
Yeah, so there actually has been a long-term conversation about the use of the CRM and My San Jose as that platform. It is very much service-based in the requests that are made, and there are CRM tools in all of the council offices. The discussion we've had with the city clerk's office and with council offices is maybe now's the time and the opportunity to start consolidating that and making a platform that reaches all council offices and gives you more active information. The dream was My San Jose 2.x would be more of that opportunity. It's obviously taken longer than we'd hoped, but it actually still is on our dashboard. And based on your feedback, maybe that's a conversation we escalate and say maybe now's the time to start talking about that again in earnest.
But in addition, the analyses that you've suggested are actually possible with the data that we have from My San Jose 1.8 right now. And in fact, we have one of our analysts working on some mock-ups to take to you to walk you through what the potential is, both for looking at geographic-based information and then to look at trends within service delivery about, okay, so there are 10,000 requests. How many of them, is this one person reporting 10,000 times, or are these 10,000 people reporting once, and what does that mean? And so we for the first time through the centralized CRM, which is a backbone to the My San Jose, we have the ability to do that. What we lack is the data analytics capability to do that in a routinized, regular way and to create standardized reports and to be very easily answer kind of more researchy questions. And so that's part of what we'll be building with the data capability. But the good news is that centralized backbone CRM exists for at least those 5 service areas. And as we expand out over time, more and more of that information will be available centralized to analyze. So we'll work with you offline and your office to mock up some of the analysis that we're able to do and get your feedback and take that into both the My San Jose kind of 2.0 process and also the larger conversation as Rob mentioned.
Excellent. Since I have you up here, and I was just looking at all the tiles, what is this, why is yellow, Facebook Telegraph? Because when when we first pushed it, I was one of the people who signed up, got the code, and I could walk around downtown and have somewhat super fast internet, or really super fast internet. But now when I'm actually logged on and I'm driving around downtown or walking around downtown, I'm logged on to the Wi-Fi. Basically, I can't do anything.
Yeah, so I might actually give Rob a reprieve on that one. So it's yellow because we have, as it shows up there are issues with schedule, budget, and scope. We originally envisioned this as a 1-year demonstration project, and it's taken longer. Where it currently stands right now is we're looking, one of the related projects up there is the community Wi-Fi strategy, which is developing a sustainable revenue stream for all of our Wi-Fi. Wickedly fast is at end of life in terms of devices. It's got a nickname, which we know about, that unfortunately isn't always true, but we don't have a sustainable revenue stream to upgrade equipment and operate it and maintain it. And that's increasingly challenging as we add in more Access Eastside school districts onto our citywide network. So what we're doing right now is we actually issued an RFI to see if there is a value exchange between the public sector and the private sector, that we can get some of the foundational funding to maintain and upgrade the Telegraph network as part of our larger community Wi-Fi network. So basically, it's taking longer, and we actually want to make sure it's sustainable. And what we don't want to do is pull a Mountain View, where Wi-Fi was enabled by a corporate sponsor for about a year, and then it was shut down because there wasn't any sustainable revenue stream. So we're really looking to make sure we can sustain our existing Wi-Fi footprint and then expand it, and that was a precondition before actually allowing Telegraph to go live to the public.
And is it just me, or has functionality stopped on that network?
No, it's still there
So it's
and
just my phone
active.
then. Okay.
It's possible that because the test ended, that the Telegraph the Facebook network team disabled the SSID.
Because I'm still logging in.
We can take that as to do.
Okay,
We can take that as to do
all
and get back to you. I'm 99% sure that's why you're not able to access it.
Okay, perfect. Councilman, do you have any questions? No? All right, Mr. Beekman.
Hi, thank you. I think to start, I think I should apologize here at the beginning of what I'm about to say that may be a bit of discomfort and uncomfort to yourselves. What I want to talk about may have some relation to, say, the incidents that happened in Gilroy this past summer, and I want to be able to talk about the Gilroy incident occasionally here on the podium, and if whatever I say becomes uncomfortable for this body, I hope we can talk about afterwards and clear the air what can be appropriate to talk about this subject here. With that all said, I'm interested in the disaster response platform app and the fire department's role with it. I think it's important to myself that the idea of, we're doing these good practices and it sounds like a good app, but, there has to be an important idea of how we talk to each other without the apps, without the technology. That, with the incidents of like Gilroy and with the flood, creating good communication with each other on just a day-to-day basis always has to be emphasized in what we're doing with technology. And I just wanted to be able to remind that for yourselves here. And I have 25 seconds left. I think that's about what I wanted to say for this issue, is just how we can continue to practice good human connections and communication that I think is we have to also really emphasize as we're developing practices of app technology. And we don't fully rely on that app technology, but rely on good human communication. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Can I get a motion? All in favor? Aye. All right, it's accepted. Moving
Great,
on.
thanks. So moving on to the next presentation, which is the digital inclusion update. As we mentioned at the beginning of the committee, procurement is really foundational to smart cities projects, given all the technology based in smart cities and the need for us to procure it fast and with quality before the technology revolves again. In much the same way, procurement is foundational to smart cities. Digital inclusion and digital skills training is foundational to quality of life in our increasingly connected society. So here to provide some exciting updates, very exciting updates on executing the digital inclusion strategy of the City of San Jose is Broadband Manager Jay Guevara and Charlene Tatis from the California Emerging Technology Foundation to give us an update on where we are with our Digital Inclusion Fund.
Thank you, Dolan. Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor, committee members, members of the public. My name is Jay Guevara, Broadband Manager in the City Manager's Office of Civic Innovation. I am here today with Charlene Tatis, Program Director for the California Emerging Technology Fund, to provide an exciting update and a call to action. We are joined by Dolan Beckel, Director of the Office of Civic Innovation, and Kip Harkness, Deputy City Manager. Today's brief presentation will cover 6 items. Number 1, why digital inclusion? 2, we'll review the digital inclusion milestones. 3, the Digital Inclusion Advisory Board. 4, funding. 5, we will unveil the digital inclusion grant applications. And finally, 6, next steps. So why digital inclusion? Simply because 95,000 San Jose residents don't have internet at home. Sometimes called the 5th utility, having high-speed internet with a working device and the digital skills to benefit one's daily life is essential in the 21st century. In June 2017, with the leadership of the Mayor's Office of Technology and Innovation, and in partnership with the Office of Civic Innovation, we used PricewaterhouseCoopers-based research to confirm the recommendations to do 3 things: to spur economic development, create a platform for the Internet of Things, and to advance digital inclusion. In August 2017, a street survey was funded by Comcast and TechCU. Stanford Graduate School of Education and Community Insights then collaborated and conducted the survey. This comprehensive research identified the barriers and opportunities for San Jose's low-income parents and children to get connected, obtain devices, and digital literacy training. In November 2017, the City Council approved the Broadband and Digital Inclusion Strategy to use a hybrid approach to spur private sector investment in the City of San Jose while generating revenue to fund the Digital Inclusion Fund. In May 2018, City Council created the Digital Inclusion Fund following the Mayor's memorandum. In January 2019, Dahlberg Advisors Report performed further user research and recommended to the City of San Jose to pursue a donor-advised fund model for the Digital Inclusion Fund. In February 2019, City Council directed the City Manager's Office to negotiate and execute a contract with the California Emerging Technology Fund, which was executed on May 15th, 2019. In August 2019, the California Emerging Technology Fund hired the Digital Inclusion Program Director, Charlene Tatis, who will be speaking later in this presentation. Also this past August, the City Manager appointed the Digital Inclusion Partnership Advisory Board, which has since conducted 2 meetings on August 22nd and September 26th to effect the Round 1 grants. And finally, just last week, the City Manager's Office hired the Digital Inclusion Program Manager, Kirsten Olson, who is with us today to help launch the Digital Inclusion Fund. And I would like to note that Kirsten joins the Civic Innovation team after serving on the board of Fair Campaign and Political Practices. So next, I would like to provide more details on the advisory board. The purpose of the advisory board is to provide recommendations to the City Council on the scope and awards of the digital inclusion grants. The people on this advisory board are a diverse representation of our community from public and private sectors across education, nonprofits, telecoms, and the City of San Jose. Appointed by the City Manager, the advisory board includes the following, and I'd like to recognize all of these individuals for their contributions and their time. Alan S. Hammond, Professor of Law and Director of the Broadband Institute of California, Santa Clara University. Angel Rios, Deputy City Manager, City of San Jose. Betty Ramirez, San Jose Youth Commission Staff, City of San Jose. Chris Funk, Superintendent, Eastside Union High School District. Christine Fitzgerald, Silicon Valley Independent Living Center. Christopher Thompson, San Jose Program Director, Knight Foundation. Dr. Lisa Andrews, CEO, Silicon Valley Education Foundation. Jill Bourne, Library Director, San Jose Public Library. Dr. Catherine Harris, Professor of English and Comparative Literature, San Jose State University. Carla Rodriguez Lomax, Public Affairs Director, Kaiser Permanente. Lenice Gutierrez, Director of Government Affairs, Comcast. Dr. Marianne Dewan, County Superintendent of Schools, Santa Clara County Office of Education. Nicole Taylor, President and CEO, Silicon Valley Community Foundation. Steve Preminger, Director, Office of Strategic Affairs, Santa Clara County. Mayor Sam Liccardo, San Jose Mayor and Co-Chair of the Advisory Board. Sophie Haruchi Forrester, San Jose Regional Manager, AARP. And finally, Teddy Varejas, Director of External Affairs, AT&T. I'd like to thank them all for their time and efforts to make this day a reality. So moving from the advisory board, let's discuss funding. Due to the progress of the small cell deployment, $1 million will be available for the initial Round 1 digital inclusion grants in 2020. As the small cell deployment progresses, executing one of the largest deployments in the nation, future grant rounds will continue to increase the base funding amount. Moreover, additional fundraising is expected to match and increase the pool of grant funding for further impact. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce Charlene Tatis, Program Director of the San Jose Digital Inclusion Partnership at the California Emerging Technology Fund. Charlene has some exciting news to share with the Smart Cities Committee and the public about the grants.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you. Thank you, Jay. Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor, committee members, and members of the public. I'm here for our call to action. On Tuesday, October 1st, we opened the San Jose Digital Inclusion Partnership grant application. So my call to action to the committee and the general public is to help us spread the word. The grant scope, first and foremost, must cover the full life cycle of digital inclusion when providing service to a household. So digital inclusion means that connectivity devices and digital literacy training are provided. The grant is an open format to drive innovation and through the ecosystem of community-based organizations and maximize the number of applications. Grantees must be a 501c3, a public agency, or an educational institution. And finally, grantee organizations must already be providing services to San Jose residents and would like to expand to digital inclusion. Applications are due by 5 p.m. on November 15th, 2019, and more information is available at sjddigitalinclusion.org. To assist grantees, we are providing 3 grant application workshops to review the application and help build the capacity of community-based organizations to see how they are not only eligible, but how they can leverage their current programs to advance full digital inclusion programming. During the coming weeks, this slide highlights the dates and times for the workshops on October 15th, October 29th, and November 5th. Finally, in keeping with previous digital inclusion community forums that the California Emerging Technology Fund provided earlier this year, we have our next community forum on October 23rd. Go ahead. Thanks. And I'm excited to be a part of the San Jose Digital Inclusion Partnership efforts with the start of the Round 1 grants. I would appreciate your help in spreading the word about the digital inclusion grant application, and I look forward to working with you and your staff. And my contact information is included on this slide. In addition to the 3 grant application workshops coming in the next few weeks in the community forum, I can also work with City Council district staff as a resource to improve digital inclusion in general. For example, I look forward to working on things such as organize a community connect fair to bring resources to residents, sponsor public service announcements, distribute affordable internet offer flyers that are available in English, Spanish, and Vietnamese, and also offer the Get Connected website, which I just recently learned is not available. However, I did bring a resource book from that website to share with you here today, because the resources are still great resources for you. And I want to thank you for your time today and your support, and I would like to turn the presentation back over to Jay. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlene. So with our announcement of the grant application and the incredible efforts of the team across the city, we are looking forward to the upcoming next steps as we close our presentation. I'd like to turn it back over to Kip.
Thank you, Jay. You know, it's said that anything that happens has 2 creations, once in the mind and then once in the real world. And there are a lot of people now who are moving swiftly forward with the creation in the real world. I want to give credit to the people in whose mind this was created first. I mentioned this in private and I wanted to mention this in public. I've had a chance to work with a lot of very, very smart people throughout the years. And without Shireen Santosham and her visionary effort to see what we could do in digital inclusion, all of this creation in the real world wouldn't have existed. And so I wanted to acknowledge her and her leadership in this, including putting us in touch with Fuse, which got us Dolan, which got us to the next point and on down the chain to what you see today. And so I just wanted to acknowledge what I'd acknowledged earlier privately in public, because I think it very much deserves that. I'm honored to be working with you and implementing the vision that you've helped create.
All right.
And that concludes our presentation.
Okay. Thanks. Just wanted to say thank you and congratulations. And certainly, Shereen got well-deserved praise, but really want to thank everybody on the team. Dolan, your work in negotiating these agreements was really critical. I appreciate us getting the resources, obviously. And Jay, I appreciate you carrying the ball along with Kip. And now, obviously, Charlene, the work that she's doing with Sunny is really important with CTF, and we're leveraging their great expertise in this area, and really appreciate that partnership. And a big welcome, of course, for our new team member, Kirsten Olson. Did I mispronounce it, Kirsten? Okay, okay, thanks, Kirsten. And great to have you on board. And we're just really excited to move forward full speed ahead. Thank you.
I'm also excited about this. I posted this on my social media yesterday, and we have one of the graphics said, was it internet access or broadband, or it's a human right. I got some pushback online. Would anybody care to push back?
I'll push back on the pushback because the United Nations basically made that declaration, right? So I think I feel like I'm in pretty good company with the United Nations to talk about that. I think when you have it, you don't realize how challenging it is when you don't have connectivity at home, right? And having to go to libraries until they close and having to go to Starbucks until it breaks down, right? So I would definitely push back on that. I mean, it is the fifth utility, right? As we're starting to, whether you're looking at technology and connectivity being part of our connected sprinklers and our connected homes and our connected water treatment infrastructure, to the basics of being able to do the homework assignment at home. I mean, I think what we'll see on October 22nd when we bring forward the recommendation to move forward with the Overfelt High School District, and the fact that with just one high school district attendance area, James Lick, the total internet usage on Access East side, the free Wi-Fi for the digitally underserved East San Jose, is 5 times the airport, the community center, and the downtown combined. Convention center combined. I mean, it shows the demand. The East San Jose is, and the students and the adults there are hungry for this. 5 times our most populated, traveled and tourist areas. So it's a basic human right. And if someone wants to go to the United Nations and argue that, I welcome them in New York to have that discussion.
Well said. Thank you, Dolan. Any other comments? If not, Mr. Beekman?
Hi, thank you. To talk about this item, it seems like you have a very good advisory board set up, and it's kind of the pillars of our community. Good people, and thank you for that. It's important. But where I'm trying to come from, that, and it was talked about with your privacy policy building of the past few weeks that you're talking about. How can it be more inclusive to bring in people from the everyday community into the process of helping shape our technology future? Because you've done a great job in building your corporate interests and a corporate structure right now, which is good, is needed. But I think there's just such an important element of the everyday community that you're not connecting with, and that you're just going to be handing down technology principles to us without enough community support and work and effort. And I know you're making those efforts, and I don't want to, harm that. But I just think there is a way to really develop how the public can have more of an important function in this process. And to mention the UN and the stuff and the work that I talk about here is basically UN principles. And UN principles with the intention, the very specific intention, how to get the everyday public more involved with these sorts of projects. And, that's why I'm always up here trying to mention that. And, You've been so dedicated to a corporate structured system that I think it's leaving out what is so exciting and hopeful right now, and that is the everyday community. We can all work to create a better democratic process. So, you know, I'll just be up here saying this. Hopefully it'll eventually sink in, and it's always an effort we all make, so good luck. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Beekman. Don't go far. Can I get a motion? All in favor? Aye. All right, report's accepted. Thank you, and I think we're on to open forum. Mr. Beekman.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for this session today. It was nice to be here, and you know, it's been a very good learning experience for me. And whatever moves forward in the future, you know, I've tried to share that you know there's principles and ideas that can really meant to create a good process. So good luck in how San Jose can work on that. And good luck to peace. You know, it's the ideas of peace. It's the ending of war. It's the ending of the ideas of shock and awe. And it's just building, you know, a more peaceful, sustainable community with good guidelines and good practices. And so good luck in these efforts we're all working towards. And a new future we're all working towards. So I just wanted to offer a few words that, on a personal note, I hope you can consider how an updated OIG office and Measure T public oversight will want to be open to positive progressive ideas, and how good guidelines in this time can create a future of better communities, democratic practices, and sustainability for everyone. Thank you. I have 43 seconds left, and with that time, 40 seconds left, I would, I guess I just wanted to mention the ideas of accountability again, and I forgot my last statement, but okay, just I will end there, and just to thank you for the efforts we're all going towards at this time, and a peaceful, sustainable future that is really possible. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, the meeting is adjourned.